It's the ESCtips.com Eurovision Road to Vienna podcast. Eurovision Weg nach Wien podcast. Warning: no Wiener jokes will be permitted during this broadcast.
Join us as we sort the contenders from the duds with our adept panel of Eurovision experts.
Hello and welcome to the final ESCtips podcast of 2015. We started back in January with our popular Melody Festival and preview and returned again in March to tip Måns Zelmerlöw as the winner. We have now reached the end of April and recorded 4 podcasts reviewing this year's Eurovision semi-finalists. With less than 2 weeks to go until rehearsals start, it's now time to discuss this year's automatic qualifiers. To help decide the fate of our 7 finalists, we have invited 2 special guests with years, maybe even decades of experience. First up, we have a gent that ranks his songs not by BPM, but PPM, that's pounds per minute. He is the co-owner of SofaBet, fellow Eurovision gambler, and someone who knows a good place to eat in London. Please welcome Daniel Gould. Hello.
Hi there, Gav. It's great to be back. Thanks for asking me.
How's your pre-rehearsals period gone this year?
It's gone reasonably well. I missed out on the Sweden gamble because, firstly, I don't like to back a country before I know the song, and my very initial reaction to the Heroes clip wasn't as positive as the final package produced, so I missed out on that, but I've got involved in Australia earlier on, so I'm happier about that.
That's good. On to our second guest now, and someone who has become a regular on the podcast. Today he published his thoughts on Song 13 in semi-final 2. His blog, which is recommended reading, is tobsonineuroland.blogspot.uk. Once again, we welcome Tobias Larsson. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad when you made the introduction that you didn't stretch it beyond decades. That you sort of stopped there. Feels like centuries at times, but it's just the 60th contest. So, yeah.
We know if Tobias had been here, he would have stretched it well beyond maybe the century.
He surely would. It's a relief sometimes when people aren't present.
So, how are you watching Eurovision this year?
From the sofa, actually, at home, keeping that's actually quite an interesting view to have as well. If you often go to the live event, it sort of gives you a different idea of how it works, and it's really useful to sit at home once in a while and see it from the sofa as well, because everything is so different.
Well, actually, to bring in Daniel there, that's exactly what Daniel does. I don't, but Daniel watches rehearsals at the arena, and then when the live show starts, he goes back to the apartment and watches from there on the small screen. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that I'm getting the same feeling as people watching it at home, so that's supposed to be the reason I do it. I still wonder whether, having watched 2 weeks of the big screen press centre rehearsals, whether my view is already clouded by that. But that's the idea behind it.
Good. Right, let's get on to today's business. We are discussing the automatic qualifiers that are made up of the big 5 nations. They are France, Germany, Italy, Spain and the United Kingdom. Then we have last year's winner and this year's hosts, Austria. And on the 10th of February, Australia were announced as this year's 40th participant and were granted automatic qualifier status, in addition to being able to vote in each of the 2 semi-finals. To keep things exciting, we'll review the countries in reverse alphabetical order. So to begin with, we'll start with the United Kingdom. They send Bianca Nicholas and Alex Lark. Together, they are Electro Velvet and sing Still in Love with You. Daniel, are you still in love with Bianca and Alex?
I wish them all the best, and that's my kind of nice introduction. I do fear that this will sink in Vienna. What it basically needs is Pasha Parfany and Lautar levels of staging. I think they need to up the slapstick of it in a good way, because I just feel that the song has a kind of fun slapstick feel to it. Unfortunately, it's rather cheap sounding in parts. It goes on for too long. There's no real chorus. So they really need to do something very special with it visually to see it kind of anywhere near the left hand of the scoreboard.
Yeah, there was a photo released on Facebook last night. I can't remember who posted it. Was it ESCas?
It was, yes.
Yes, ESCas. So they had a photo from the practice room for United Kingdom released, and it seemed to hint that there may be two male and female Charleston dancers, two pairs of dancers, either side of Alex and Bianca, which kind of suggests how I thought the choreography would go. I kind of thought that they needed to bring out the Strictly type performance and really exemplify the Charleston aspect of it. Tobias, how's your Charleston swivel?
Oh, it's wonderful. I sort of was born into that somehow. Not really, but I must say I think that the UK entry in general this year is underrated. Not because it's a terrific song, but because given the amount of ballads and mid-tempo numbers that we will have and that will spill into the final, I think with a bit of luck when it comes to the running order and everything, I think the UK can stand out by a mile because it's so musically different. And if they manage to make it fun, like it feels professional. I surprisingly often lately in the last 10, 15 years, the UK entrants have come across as really amateurish. And if they manage to come across as professionals, like they know what they're doing and they're doing this because they enjoy doing it, then I think this can do reasonably well. I wouldn't say anywhere close to top 5 or anything, but I'd say that it can be a surprise in the making if they get it right.
I think when it was first released, the market kind of thought of that point you were making, that it's underrated, it's a up-tempo number in a sea of ballads. I think since then, if anything, the pre-Eurovision concerts have shown us one thing, and that the chemistry between Alex and Bianca isn't particularly strong. And I think their interest levels are not particularly good. Alex, I think, looks a little bit bored at times. I'm not sure whether you've noticed that, Daniel.
Yeah, as I say, I need him running around the stage like Pasha Parfany, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Far more life. Maybe the BBC will surprise us. Maybe the staging will be a triumph. Next up, we have Spain and another song from Swedish writer Thomas Geirsson. Amanthea will be performed by the girlfriend of Man United goalie David De Gea. So, Tobias, is Edurne Premiership quality for you?
She can clearly sing and perform. She's not one of those who will be sort of, blown off stage by her stage fright or anything. But I think that Spain have fallen into the same trap that Georgia fell into 2 years ago. They call Thomas Geirsson and they want something good from him. And he goes through his drawer and he finds something. Georgia got a very, very typical ballad that didn't do very well at all. And this time I feel that he has just taken out Lorene's old My Heart Is Refusing Me. Even though he didn't write that, but it feels like he has been tampering. Like that's where his inspiration comes from. And I just hear that. I just hear something that wants to be more interesting than it really is. And I think it's a little bit static and a little bit, goes on and on. It will need one heck of a performance to sort of really stand out, I think.
Yeah, I do agree, actually. And if there's one thing that you can't take away from this, it's a chorus that you can hum along to. Daniel, is this the dawn of something special for Spain, or were the Suns set on their hopes for another year?
I tend to agree with the points just made. This is a good general knowledge question. I had to look it up myself beforehand. When was the last time Spain finished top 10 in the televote?
Oh, go on, enlighten us.
I have no idea.
It's 2004. And that tells me a couple of things. One, it tells me that they've had lots of terrible entries, but they've had some good ones as well. I think the language barrier is a problem for Spain. I know the fanboys love a song in Spanish, but somehow they haven't managed to connect with the wider audience for a while. And I can't see this one changing that. For the points that you guys have just made, I don't think it develops in an interesting way. I don't think it develops as a song at all. And while she's good, she's fine. She's not kind of Pastora Soler amazing. So I just can't see this one sort of kind of reaching the heights of that or Ruth and just squeaking into the top 10.
Yeah, I kind of think it's going to have a Force 10 wind machine on her. It's going to be quite old-fashioned in that sense. The staging will probably feature big stormy clouds and stuff like that. And by the end, the audience remember it for that rather than the actual song. Anyway, it's time for one of the favourites now, and Italy send Ivolo with Grande Amore. Daniel, do you have great love for Ivolo?
I think the boys are fantastic, I really do. I think they're world-class performers, and they're the kind of wild cards of the events. We can't really be sure of how they're going to do because Popera doesn't have a great record in the contest. Having said which, this is a much better effort in every respect than previous ones. But because I'm uncertain of just how much of the audience want to see this from their Eurovision winner, that kind of uncertainty creates a little bit of scepticism for me. But I think it will do really well, and I can't rule out any kind of, top result for them. But again, I can't quite kind of judge it by anything, and therefore kind of call it as a winner.
Okay. Well, my own thoughts, or just to bring up some of the stats, is that in Italy it won by the biggest televote margin, and actually against a more modern lineup, which would be quite surprising. A lot of people have commented that the Sanremo jury was against it, but the Sanremo jury is far more highbrow than the Eurovision jury. And so far, I think the most typical poll, and I don't like using polls, the Euro jury poll, which uses previous Eurovision winners, etc., it's doing quite well in that. Plus then it's got 22 million hits on YouTube, and it's the one song that just keeps on clocking up an extra million hits every single week. It's also multi-platinum. I also find that Italy are quite politically neutral. So whereas, again, we go back to last year, Sweden were undermarked by one or two countries. You could argue that Russia will be undermarked by the West due to current political circumstances, whereas Italy are they just seem to be an accepted country. They can send anything and everyone just likes Italy. A comment on the guys themselves, they're quite young, they're fresh, they're relevant, they're stylish. I think compared to France, which was duffy and more traditional opera, I probably wouldn't call it a pop song, and I didn't think that Amaury, I don't think you could have any affection for Amaury when he was on TV. And I think Latvia's song some time ago was a bit slapstick, a bit theatrical, almost a bit West End. It didn't take itself very seriously, whereas I think Italy, I think it's capable of international chart success. I think these guys are proper pop stars. I think their success in the US supports that. Tobias, if you had two tenors, would you bet on Italy to win in Vienna?
I wouldn't bet against it, to put it like that. I think this is a very possible winner. My problem with this one is, just as you said, that opera tends not to do so well. I think it's a genre that sort of annoys a large segment of the audience. It sort of keeps poking them in the eye, which is very unpleasant. I do think this is the best popera entry ever in Eurovision, alongside Italy's Fiume di Parole in 1997, which also did it in a very tasteful way, with sort of the opera doesn't get in the way of the pop, which I like. I'd say this is one of three very likely winners. Not the most likely out of those three, but very likely.
Okay. So time for Germany now, and possibly the fastest Eurovision song change in history. Following the withdrawal of winner Andreas Kumat, Anne-Sophie was swiftly hailed as Germany's Eurovision representative. She will sing Black Smoke. Tobias, have Germany's hopes gone up in smoke for another year?
No, I don't think so. My problem with this one, I liked it a lot at first, and I was actually disappointed when it didn't win in Germany. And then all of a sudden it won anyway. And that was confusing and all, and sort of undermined her very much in the German market and among Eurovision fans, which I think is a very it's an explanation as to why Germany has been held down very much in the speculations. But what she needs above all is coaching. When you see her live performance, she doesn't know how to perform in front of cameras, and she gets a little bit screechy and squeaky in her voice, and it's a shame. I think the song is really good, and with a good, solid performance, I think this can do reasonably well. Germany has done it before, when they send in really good pop stuff, people don't hesitate to vote for Germany. Somehow they have some kind of credibility in this area. And I think with a good performance, it could be a top 10. But if she keeps on like she did in the German final, then she will end up pretty close to the end, I'm afraid.
I can agree with some of those points, actually. And apart from the screechy bits in her voice, one thing I've noticed from the German final and then again this weekend at London Eurovision concert was her slightly, I don't know, she looks very overconfident, both on camera in the German final, but then on stage in London. Almost if, look at me, I'm really good. I don't think the TV audience will warm to her unless she tones some of that down. And I don't think she actually did a slut drop this weekend in London. And again, it's another thing that I just don't think will work well on TV. I think she needs a choreographer, and she just needs to be toned down in some of her movements. What about you, Daniel? What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a song that's probably doing better with juries than televoters. I think the song itself is distinctive and interesting, and she's a pretty distinctive and interesting performer, even though I have some issues with how she performs, which you two have touched on. So I think that it could possibly breach the jury top 10, because I think it's a very respectable, credible effort. I'm not sure there's enough there for televoters to get interested in. So I do fear that the televote is going to bring it down. Obviously, a good draw would help here. So yeah, there are lots of variables at play, and that goes for its results as well. But I think juries are going to prefer it to televoters.
Okay, so on to France now, and Lisa Angel will sing about war and warn us not to forget with her rousing chanson N'oubliez pas. Daniel, will you forget Lisa?
She's got a great live vocal, so I won't forget her. But I mean, the song is straight out of 2001. I mean, it's written by the same guy who wrote the 2001 entry. And lovely though it is, a lovely kind of old-fashioned francophone ballad. Again, I think that juries are going to be rewarding her vocals, but televoters should, on the whole, think that this is pretty dated. And much as I like her delivery, I think that might count against her.
Yeah, I kind of agree there. I don't think it's one to come last. I think there will be enough jury recognition there. And I think if the message is explained by the various national commentators, I think there'll be a bit of love there for her as well, just on the basis of current political events. What about you, Tobias? What do you think?
I have a problem. Well, the song is really old-fashioned, I must say. Robert Goldman is a great songwriter, but this is not one of his better days, apparently. And my biggest problem with this isn't the singing. She's singing it wonderfully, but the interpretation is horrible for me. And I am a French speaker. I understand what she sings. And for me, it's like she's not connecting to the lyrics at all. She sings about a tragedy and war and how her village is wiped out by soldiers. And she sounds like she's singing about, her new kitchen, or will it be a sunny day tomorrow, or what kind of sandwiches should I bring to the picnic? She doesn't sound convincing at all. She's, completely detached from the message, and that drives me up the wall. She's so cold towards subject. She doesn't connect to it. So for me, this is I can't see who will vote for it.
No, I agree. Over to the hosts, Austria now. The Makes will perform I Am Yours. Tobias, do you want to make them yours?
That's an interesting question, intriguing. I think that they're pretty good. I think the lead singer. I think that's the problem with many groups in Eurovision and elsewhere, that it doesn't feel like a band. It feels like a solo singer with some added musicians. They don't feel like a band at all to me. It doesn't matter though. He sings well, and I like the style here. It's quite unusual for Eurovision. But then I feel that the song itself, it's so done before. I've heard millions and trillions of songs that sound exactly like this and say more or less the same thing. It's no original. It's not original in any way, but I still like it. It's a good song. It's a good radio song. It could have hit potential, but I can't really see who will grab the phone and vote for it because they think it's the best out of 27 songs on the final nights.
Yeah, I agree. And when I first saw them perform it, I always thought of the Kings of Leon. And if the Kings of Leon released this song, I still don't think it would be a number one. In fact, I'd probably think it would be between 5 to 10, which on the Eurovision stage, compared to all of the other brilliant entries that have been entered this year, it kind of makes you think, well, where does this song sit in a 27-act final? And I kind of think more towards 10th to 15th mark. Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, funny enough, the night it was chosen, I was out at a restaurant and just checking on some forums, and there was some excitement when it was chosen. I remember rushing back to hear the song, and so I had these sort of high expectations, and I mean, it's a perfectly respectable song. I was slightly disappointed at just how kind of plodding it felt, given the kind of the anticipation I had. So again, I think juries are going to like the fact that, it's credible. There's a band on stage. He sings well. The composition is nice. But televoters, it's relatively distinctive, but it's number 14 in the running order. We know that already. I think that it's going to suffer from a televote and not being quite interesting enough.
I must add, though, that I watched the Austrian selection this year, and for a country that doesn't have a lot of pop industry, I thought the Austrian selection was pretty interesting. It had a lot of good, interesting sounds and acts and songs. This wasn't my favorite at all in it, but I think that if Austria manages to keep this up and actually manage to find this kind of talent and this kind of more interesting songs, if they're interested in doing that, they could actually become more of a force in this contest than they've been in the past 30 years or so, which would be nice, actually.
Well, hopefully that is what winning Eurovision does. Anyway, it's time to make a 9,000-mile trip down under now. Eurovision mega fans Australia have long petitioned the EBU to let them compete in the contest. Now they've got their wish and selected Idol winner Guy Sebastian to represent them in Vienna with the song Tonight Again. Daniel, would you say Tonight Again to Guy?
I would. I think this is the most sort of obviously chart-friendly song in the competition. I think it's lifted by an excellent live performance. I think that it's a very dangerous contender, given that we've got a mixture of the credibility of the song allied with the novelty of their representation. I actually think it's the main danger to Mons as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The ESCtips comments board has been rolling into action this week. One of them was suggesting that Australia is this year's beard. It's the novelty. It's the one thing that everyone will be talking about right through the semi-finals when they're announced, because many people are still in the dark. I still speak to people and say, Australia are in it, and they go, what are they doing in it? So I think the novelty value of them being there, and then when they do finally perform in the final, will impact on enough people to perhaps send them a vote or two. I think the one thing that could count against Guy is if he is put in the final slot. I think the attrition of 27 songs might just wear on enough people by then. One interesting thing is that they do seem to be taking it seriously. They've got U2's lighting designer, Bruce Rasmus, involved. The staging is meant to include some kind of street lighting rig. And this guy predominantly works with LEDs and interactive types of staging. I think the question also remains whether enough votes will come from the East. Maybe not every nation, but I think there'll be plenty of goodwill for Guy. I don't like to, as I said earlier, I don't like to read into polls, but I think Europoll is as close as you can get to a Eurovision jury, and that has seen plenty of support for Australia so far. What do you think, Tobias? Is Guy a threat to Mons?
Absolutely. He's the third one, I'd say. Sweden, Italy and Australia are probably the three most probable winners at this point, before we've seen any of the rehearsals. I don't know, maybe someone will sort of light up the sky like a firework and change all of that. But from my perspective, it looks like these three. Then I tend to think that music professionals have a tendency of overrating this one, because it's a lovely production. It sounds very modern. It sounds very contemporary. He's a great singer. I keep getting the feeling that it's a better production than it is a good song, because I like the build-up and I like the sort of the bridge up to the chorus. And then the chorus is a little bit disappointing. I'm not really sure. And besides, if you judge from what the semi-finals have looked like, I think that Austrian television likes to kick off the show with a very lively, happy number. If Australia gets drawn into the first half, they could very well think that Australia is a lovely opener, and then all hope is gone, then they won't stand a chance. But I'd say it's very probable to go very far, but I still say that Mons is slightly more probable than this one.
I'm not sure about you, Danny, but with my producer's hat on, I would tend to position Australia after Sweden. What did you think?
Lyrically and musically, you mentioned the pimp slot, and that I think that, talking about, we've had a great night. I feel like doing it all again. I mean, it's the kind of song that if it was drawn second half, it would make complete sense to put it in the pimp slot, which I agree with you. I think that I'm not sure that's completely ideal in a 27 field final, but if you'd backed it already, you'd see its odds contract further. So perhaps it wouldn't be so bad after all.
Yeah, I kind of agree. So we get to the point now where now we've reviewed all the songs, we need to pick a winner. Obviously, this is subject to rehearsals. But last year, Tobias picked Austria at this point as the winner.
I did, didn't I?
Yes.
Wasn't that impressive or what?
So this is our time to knock him off his perch. What do you think, Tobias? Who's your winner this year?
My winner is actually Sweden.
Okay.
And it's very unusual, I must say. I'm born in Sweden and I'm raised with this kind of Swedish Eurovision music. And it's very, very seldom that I believe Sweden will do that well. I usually keep Sweden down in my predictions. But I actually think that this song plus the performance of Mons will have the widest appeal. I can't see anything standing in the way of it. I don't think a lot of people will get annoyed by anything in it. Everyone can like it a little bit. While I think that Italy, for instance, the opera thing is going to put some people off. And for Australia, I also think that the world is full of sore losers. I think the countries that lose out in the semi-finals are going to start asking questions like, why are we not in the final and why is Australia there? And that could sort of backfire, not an awful lot, but a little bit, and enough perhaps not to make them win.
Yeah, I think that's a thought that quite a few of us had when it was first announced that why have they been granted automatic qualifier status, and certainly why have they been given more privileges than every other country in voting in both semi-finals. What about you, Daniel?
I really, really strongly respect Australia's chance, but I do think the most likely winner is Sweden.
Okay. I'm going to disagree with all of you. I'm going to pick Italy. It was the first song, or first proper song, that was selected. It was the first song that I had a bet on, and I just respect its chances. It's one of the few contender songs that gives me goosebumps. So I'm hoping that we'll be in Italy at this time next year.
But then, can I ask you, if this would be the kind of year where all the votes sort of fall, like when the votes are all over the place, and we end up with a running scared kind of winner, the kind of song that isn't perhaps anyone's favourite, but that has consistent scoring from anyone, who do you think that will be in that case this year?
So we're looking for the dark horse to just come from nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what? I mean, even Russia could be threatening to do that. Maybe Azerbaijan if they've got enough support. I don't know. Again, Azerbaijan was only ever thought of a winner when it just became apparent that they just had that clear air from that slot that they got in 2011.
I mean, my top 5 is rounded out by Italy, Estonia, and Russia. So if you're saying top 5 about something, you're saying that it's capable in such a scenario as Tobias mentioned. And I will give a shout out to 2 others. I'm intrigued by the Belgian entry, although I think it's a little too left field to win. And the most accessible entry of the lot is the Lithuanian one. But again, That's possibly not quite a strong enough song. But, if we're talking about scenarios where votes are going all over the place, then I'll bring in those countries too.
Well, yeah, the one thing that I thought about at the weekend is actually Lithuania is very much like Playing with Fire. It has that kind of interaction, just without the piano.
They would just need to be more outgoing and invite the audience much more than they've done before. But that's perfectly doable. I'd like to shout out for Slovenia, actually. I think that Slovenia could be a surprise. Maybe not winner, but I think that they could sneak up and do a top 5 if they're lucky. I mean, everyone needs so much luck in the final with the running order. It's so easy to get lost. 27 songs in one final. It's a nightmare. The risk of getting, behind someone who sort of ruins your chances is enormous this year. But, yeah, I wouldn't count them out anyway.
Right. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our Eurovision podcast season. Our coverage doesn't stop there, though. We'll be blogging from rehearsals in Vienna right through to the final. Daniel will also be blogging from Vienna, and you can follow his thoughts at sofabet.com. The ESCtips chat room will reopen from Saturday the 9th of May, and I'll also be tweeting from at ESCtips_Gavster. Daniel will be tweeting from at sofabet. You can also follow Tobias's Twitter. He's at Tobson Helsinki. I'd like to thank all of our guests this year and thank Daniel and Tobias for their time today. That's it from us. We hope you have a fantastic Eurovision 2015. So for now, it's goodbye from Daniel, Tobias.
Yes, goodbye.
And from me, Gavin, goodbye.
Show us some love by following us and sharing this podcast with your Facebook and Twitter friends.
Until next time, auf Wiedersehen.